Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, OP married his wife after a whirlwind romance, despite financial struggles. Over time, she became disillusioned with their modest life, criticizing his income. After catching her cheating, they divorced, and she left to pursue a wealthier man. Months later, she reached out after being dumped, but he refused to reconcile. Now, he's rebuilding his life, focusing on himself. Now let's get into the story. I met my wife while I was working a job in my chosen field, but it was lower paying than I would have wanted. It wasn't too shocking because I was a dejected millennial who had grown up in this economy, so I was just happy to find something that could pay me. When I was getting coffee, I bumped into her, and we got to talking. I know it sounds a little corny, but the two of us did hit it off right away. After talking in line for a bit, we exchanged numbers and then went out on a date. It was one of those whirlwind romances where everything happened all at once. I think maybe the fact that it happened so fast blinded me to any red flags there could have been in the beginning. After about a year, we were getting married. I proposed out of the blue. I don't know why I rushed it. Maybe it was the honeymoon phase, but we married in a small ceremony and she moved from her apartment to my modest one-room apartment. Now, I never had a lot of money. My family was lower middle class, and so was my ex-wife's family, so it wasn't like the two of us didn't come from a similar environment. We didn't want to build a secure life, but if it didn't happen right away, that was fine. Things like this did take time. After all, get-rich-quick schemes were exactly that. They were schemes and didn't work. For the first year of World War II, things seemed good and it was like we were on the same page. Then my wife started to appear as if she were disillusioned with the life we were building. Suddenly, the apartment wasn't good enough. Nothing I did seemed to be good enough. I wasn't making the right amount of money. We couldn't do anything romantic because of the lack of income and just anything that cost money. Her biggest gripe was that I didn't earn enough money. Not her, me. She worked full-time as well, but since I was the husband, I should be the one who was providing more of the money to the relationship. It's a shame that I tried, but I was still deeply in love with this woman. I worked longer hours and put away as much money as I could. When this was happening, I was exhausted all the time. My wife would start complaining about how I never had any time with her, even though I was working overtime for her. The longer it went on, the less I wanted to do it anymore, so I realized something was going to have to change. I planned to talk with my wife and see if we could try to work things out. If I spoke with her, then certainly she would be able to see my point of view right. At least I thought this would be the case. So I decided to come home early one day to speak with her. However, when I got home and looked for my wife, I found her in our bed with some other guy. She screamed and I just turned and went into the kitchen. I heard movement from our bedroom followed by the slamming of the front door. My wife came in asking what I was doing here. My response was to ask her what she was doing with some other guy in our bed. She claimed it didn't mean anything, so I asked how long it had been going on. My wife admitted it was going on for the past 6 months, so for half a year she had been lying to me. I asked how they met, and she said they met on a social media site. Honestly, I didn't care about anything else she had to say after that. Once I knew she was cheating on me, it was like the wool had been pulled from over my eyes. I was able to see all the red flags I initially missed and knew there was only one step ahead of us we could take. It had to be a divorce. There was no other way. She changed her tune right away when it became clear I wouldn't change my mind and take her back. So once I said it was over, she packed her things and left. From there, we went forward with the divorce. My wife wanted to make it official so she could go be with her AP. Over time, I came to find out that the AP was quite rich, and once I found that out, the pieces started to fit into place. My wife, or now ex-wife, had always wanted to live a far better life than what I was able to provide right now. It was like she wanted to get one of those get-rich-quick schemes, and if you know anything about them, you will know that they do not work no matter how much you want them to. By getting involved with a rich guy, she did accomplish her goal, so I guess there was that, but it still didn't mean it would work out. Once the divorce was final, my ex moved in with the guy and started an official relationship with him. I tried my best to push her out of my mind and focus on rebuilding my life. The first step was to stop focusing on work so much. I could still work, but also enjoy my life. By doing this, I was able to spend more attention on my hobbies and just the little things that I used to enjoy in life. A few months after the divorce, my ex-wife got in contact with me. She called me from one of her friend's phones since I blocked her main number. Once I answered, my ex started crying about how her new boyfriend had dumped her after 6 months. There went her backup plan, much to my amusement. My ex had always wanted something more in life, but she had never been willing to work hard for it. This was reality slapping her in the face, and I'm not going to lie. I was loving every moment of it. I don't care if it had been petty of me because I had worked myself like a dog to make my wife happy, only to have it blow up in my face. It was clear my ex was contacting me to get some pity or something along those lines. At least, it was the only thing I could think of. Whatever the reason, she was looking in the wrong place for it, and I told her as much. I do wonder if I reacted differently, if she would have tried to ask if she could stay with me or give us another chance. Honestly, I had no idea because as soon as I brushed her off, she started shouting and then hung up on me. If hanging up on me was supposed to hurt then, this was one of the best punishments I had ever received because I didn't want to talk to her anymore anyway. Through the grapevine, I heard that my ex-wife showed up at the guy's house and tried to get him to take her back. It nearly ended up with her getting arrested in the process. My ex clearly couldn't let go of this guy because he was her one chance at getting rich quickly. Hey, if she wanted to waste time going after him then, so be it. Since I kicked her out, she was no longer my problem. Let her be her AP's problem, or whatever other guy she ends up straining along. I've moved on in my life. The future may seem a little bit uncertain, but the one thing I am sure of is that my ex is not going to be a part of it under any circumstances. Today's second story. In this story, OP met his future wife at Burning Man. They maintained a long-distance relationship, moved in together, and had a small wedding. For years later, he discovered she was cheating with Tiffany, her boss and best friend. The man confronted them, leading to his wife moving out and their divorce. Now let's get into the story. My wife, 27 female, and I, 24 male, met at the Burning Man festival. At the time, I had just graduated college and started a full-time job in Nevada. She lived and worked in Colorado. When we got to talking, I realized I never wanted to stop talking to her. I felt myself falling for her and wishing me lived closer. We exchanged numbers and started talking as soon as the festival ended. Really, she texted me even before I reached my car. We maintained a long-distance relationship for a year before she asked me to move in with her. I found the job in her state and packed my bags. It was only another year before I bought a house and proposed to her. Neither of us had more than 2 family members that kept in touch, so we had a small wedding ceremony with them. Our marriage was just what I wanted and expected it to be. I was convinced I had met the coolest, most suitable and exciting woman I could find. I wanted to love her forever, and she said the same to me. Before I moved in with her, she wasn't a very tidy person, but she made it a goal of hers to keep a clean, organized home for us. By the time we moved into her house, she was a wonderful housekeeper and a woman worthy of being a wife. She also really enjoyed her full-time job, working for a boss that was also her best friend. I heard a lot of great things about Tiffany. They met in college and remained close until Tiffany's business was well enough off the ground that she could hire people. My wife was there for her and proved herself to be an excellent employee. Since my wife was there from the start, she made a generous salary. I never met Tiffany, but my wife and her went out together every once in a while to blow off work steam, they'd say. About 4 years after we were married, I noticed my wife was holding her phone a lot, more than she used to. She started holding on to it or keeping it in her pockets. I seriously doubted this meant anything bad because my wife was still just as sweet and attentive as she always was. Looking back on it, she might have been even more sweet and attentive than usual. On one ordinary Friday evening, she texted me that she was going out with Tiffany. I replied that I would meet my brother for dinner and see her at home by 9. I left the house to meet him, but he canceled plans. I returned home and went straight to the bathroom before turning any lights on. While I was in there, I heard the front door open and 2 voices. I turned off the bathroom light and listened. I heard my wife giggle and open the back sliding door. Then I heard a man's voice. I watched them from within the shadows of the house. They stripped off their clothes and jumped in the pool. They'd frolicked and splashed around for a bit before they started making out and having intimate. I grabbed the man's pants, found his wallet, and took his ID. His last name sounded familiar. I got in my car and drove to his house. I knocked on the door and was greeted by a gorgeous woman. I handed her her husband's ID and told her what he was doing at my house with my wife. She didn't want to believe it at first, but as it sunk in, she became devastated. She started cursing and grabbing anything of his to throw outside. She invited me to wait with her inside for him to return home. I didn't really want to, but I also didn't want to go home, so we waited. He arrived home and his wife handed him his ID. He was confused and even more so when I stepped forward. I told him I found that in his wallet, in his pants, after he stripped for my wife. His jaw dropped and he just looked between us before getting frustrated and embarrassed, asking what was going to happen now. His wife kicked him out right in front of me. I wanted to leave, but she took a moment from yelling to ask me to stay. Once he was out of the house, she sat down with me and apologized for what happened on behalf of her husband and my wife. We got to talking, and it didn't take long for me to realize this was Tiffany. This was my wife's best friend and boss. I freaked out and told her who my wife was. She could not believe it. She called my wife and told her she needed her to come over right away. When she got there, we both confronted her, telling her she just cheated on me with her best friend's husband. My wife freaked out, crying, swearing that she didn't know he was her husband. She looked at me and pleaded for me to believe that this was just a meaningless mistake. She said they had met at a bar and that he wasn't wearing a ring. I asked her when and why she was even at a bar alone, but then I said it didn't matter. And it didn't matter how sorry she was, because she still willingly brought another man into my house and slept with him. Tiffany said even if my wife didn't know he was her husband, she was not the kind of friend or employee she needed in her life. My wife was broken in that instant. She didn't know what to do with herself. She just kept pleading with empty words. I told her to move out of my house. Tiffany invited me back inside. She screamed after us and even banged on the door. Eventually, she was moved out of my house and the divorce was final. She was a huge waste of my time, but if it worked for her, I never met my current wife of 12 years. Tiffany, our exes didn't stay together after this. Their relationship was based entirely on fleeting emotions, infatuation, and excitement. Today's third story. In this story, Opie had a 7-year relationship with his girlfriend, and he was planning to propose at her brother's wedding. After proposing, he discovered through her phone that she'd been having an affair with her married boss. Devastated, he exposed their texts to family and colleagues, causing chaos at the wedding. Now let's get into the story. I, 29 male, met my girlfriend Diana, 27, while we were in college. She was the shy, I don't socialize type during the early periods of college, but over the years, her mindset changed. Diana and I were close friends. I could rely on her for anything and vice versa. I ended up falling head over heels for her, and it turned out she felt the same way too. It wasn't a competition. Glad to say we were the best couple in school. She really meant the world to me. After college, Diana and I moved in together to try to take our relationship to the next level. We've been together for 7 years and we weren't married, but it felt like we were. Of course, I knew I was going to propose someday, and it was only a matter of time. But I was waiting for the perfect time because I wanted it to be the most memorable day of our lives. And just like that, an opportunity presented itself. Diana's elder brother was having his wedding in a few months, and I felt that would be the perfect time to propose to her if her brother and wife were okayed. And they did, and were really happy about the surprise event. So a few days before the wedding, We flew down to San Francisco where the wedding was to be held. Finally, it was time. Everything was set. The ceremony was held and the reception began. As planned, I proposed to Diana amidst cheers from the crowd. It was such a joyful moment and Diana was crying and her family was emotional. Later on, we were all having a blast and Diana had disappeared off to somewhere when suddenly Diana's phone buzzed on the table in front of me. I peeked at it and it had a text from Amy saying, "I miss you." I felt that it was all good. Girls are always close like that. Then another text came and said, "I want mine to you so badly." It's like my world had stopped in its orbit. I felt everything around me slow down and for a moment my world tilted. I was sweating buckets and I didn't know what to do. I took her phone and went into the bathroom. I went through every nook and cranny of the phone and was stunned. She was screwing another guy, and it wasn't just any other guy, but it was her boss. Her boss was twice her age and married with kids. They had been having a physical affair for a few months. There was also a lot of emotional stuff, and I love use exchange every day. I was a wreck at this point, and I was pulling my hair and banging my head against the wall. I just effing proposed to this train wreck of a woman in front of all her family. What friggin' joke. I'm not proud of what I did next. I took screenshots of some of their most graphic chats where they reminisced about the various intimate acts they performed on each other and uploaded them to her family group chat, work group chat, and even school and college group chats on WhatsApp. Then I dumped the phone, got into my car, and left the reception without a word to anyone. I was broken emotionally and couldn't even think properly. I kept imagining all the things she could have done with the guy in bed. The more I thought about it, I felt like turning the car around and taking her life. 15 minutes later, her brother called, asking where I was and what I did. That his wedding was in shambles, because all his family and friends had seen the chance. His parents, aunts, and his very senior grandma were making such a fuss and screaming profanities at Diana, who had locked herself up in the bride's dressing room to escape them, especially her mom who had started beating her with her clutch. His bride was very stressed, and her side of the family was trying to calm down the situation and prevent his mom and grandma from killing Diana. He was pissed at me and started cussing me out, to which I just hung up. I was completely drained. I drove back home crying. Diana FaceTimed with me that night. Her eyes were swollen from crying, one side more than the other, looking suspiciously like it had taken a beating. She explained what happened afterward. Her SIL side of the family peeled her mom away from the bride's room door and took her away so she could sneak out and get away with a friend of hers. It's where she's at now. She didn't try to deflect blame, but owned up to her misdeed. She said she didn't know why she started an affair because her life was perfect as it was. She's now lost most of everything she had in life within a few hours. Her family hates her, her SIL is murderous, and her friends won't return her calls. She and her boss are both in hot water and will likely lose their jobs soon. She also said she understood why I did what I did and that she was a horrible human being who deserved all of this. There are 2 more months of the lease and I'll be paying it, though I won't live here. I don't know what will happen to her, but I'm ready to move on. I've wasted enough of my time with this woman already.